you need to be creators of knowledge because that's where the most of the money is. Those who simply consume don't make that much. Now, maybe you don't care about money, and that's fine, some of you don't. But let me put it this way. Those who create knowledge have more to say about where we're going. Their lives are more impactful than those who simply consume. So if you are among those who really want to make a difference in life, in terms of collective activity, then I invite you to think about creating knowledge as opposed to consuming it. Does that make sense? There's a big difference there. Now, I want to also make it clear, I do not think that the value of a human being is simply determined on the basis of whether he or she has helped to make life better for the earth. I really don't think so. I honestly don't. I absolutely reject that notion. I think that there's a different score for the sum value of your life. And I won't say what it is, but you could guess from all of my comments. But I do think that if you invest in your children or your grandchildren or just one person, I don't care if you change the world. I think that's valuable. You know what I'm saying? But we live in a university that doesn't really talk about that much. It talks about your contribution to the collective. I'm here to say I disagree with the university on that. Okay? But at the same time, I say it because today I'm talking about how you can contribute to the collective good. And this is it. This is where you can do more than you can in just about anything else. Now, there's some things that maybe you might. You could rise to be President of the United States. Great. Secretary General of the United Nations, although I don't think he really does anything. But, okay, fine. Right? But in the mean, it's going to be for most of you, the overwhelming majority, you need to be able to create knowledge. Create what doesn't exist. Not consume what's there. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean we ignore what's there. And I hope that the paper is demonstrating this. Because we begin, even though it's the second section, the actual beginning of our work is with the second section. It's the literature review. We have to know what others have said. So at this point, we are consuming knowledge. But what's the point? It's to contribute to the further development of knowledge, right? Which means creativity, right? Now, it doesn't come across that way because of the stilted nature of the process itself and a kind of a staccato writing style that I'm imposing upon you. But that's how science communicates. Read science articles. They're not like, deep one night while I was thinking about the nature of life, it struck me that apples fall from trees. Oh my gosh, it was a crash of thunder and lightning. And it was like an incredible moment. Does that sound like a science article to you? That's right. They're written in this boring, stilted style. And why is that? Because we want to communicate quickly, right? And so therefore, we need to look for elements, and therefore that means we need some sort of style guide. That is, and by style I don't mean, oh, look at my style today. No, I mean style means what goes where, in what order. That's a style, okay? So for instance, the Chicago Manual of Style that I'm requiring you to use for references, that isn't stylistically cute, right? Certainly doesn't look as nice as my tie, but it's what we understand by style guide. It is a stylistic format that's imposed upon you, yeah? So what we have here is what I said. We have a canon, C-A-N-O-N. Nobody gets nervous. No projectiles in here, nothing going on. The C-A-N-O-N is a canon of research, right? And this tells us not only how we communicate with each other, but what we say, what we talk about. Not the exact words, obviously, because that's the creativity part of it, but it's, here's what I expect to see. So when you go to the research articles, this is what you should see. You should see something that looks like a research question section and will not be anywhere stilted a style in now my pink tie thing, right? It will be much better language, but not flowery. And there would be no inductive, cutesy kind of thing like, you know, the gift of the Magi. Well, you are not going to get what I'm talking about to the end, but just stay with me because this is so good. Nobody's staying with you. Because we're not writing for the book market. We're not writing to entertain in that sense. We are writing to inform. Does that make sense? Inform what? Inform the world of what we think we have created and let them judge it. That's why we're doing it. Okay? So, we have that literature review, which is actually the second piece of the paper. We're going to do it first. Questions on it. What are your questions? I give you 5 minutes to look at it so that you could not tell me that you had not looked at it until Sunday night. But it's probably the last time most of you looked at it since.
So you need, for Monday, the 20 sources you want us to have, do they need to be formatted in the bibliography APA format?
Yes. So,
Can I use a newspaper article, or do they have to be scholarly journals?
the answer is you may,
Okay.
but you should do so with caution, right? That's because this is the one place where you could get something that allows you to frame the debate, which comes in a research question section, right? Not the debate, but frame the variation, right? Or it's the only place where you can get a hypothesis that you're kind of looking at, right? Other than that, the better place to go is to the research literature, okay? Or the really good analytical research literature coming out of our think tanks, like AEI or Brookings or RAND. These institutions that are you know, more oriented towards current demands of not just customers, but also of like U.S. government or, you know, whatever the issues are at hand, right? They would study something like, you know, the North Korean nuclear program and might ask some research questions there. Those are very strong studies. Those are good. What we don't want is the kind of rhetoric that we're getting, and we've always had it, but we just have more of it now. You know, it's kind of like Bernie Sanders' speech at the last party meeting, you know, or Donald Trump's speech in Ohio. No, nothing like that. Or any comments on it, or any sort of. Unfortunately, there's a lot of good researchers work for nonprofits. Unfortunately, the nonprofits pervert their research when it's published. So I have to be careful about it, because you get a lot of good researchers. They're putting that stuff out to the nonprofit agency, and I've had this happen to me. The nonprofit will turn around what you said because it suits what they think their political purposes. But in the end, it comes out and bites them in the ass. You will, and it's worth talking about this just a second. You will all be introduced to this very, very shortly if you haven't already been. Is that people reinterpret things? All right. So, for instance, one of the studies that I've been a part of is what we try to figure out how many right now women are being prostituted in Nebraska per month, and out of that number, how many of them are involuntarily being prostituted? That is, they're traffic victims. They are not criminals. They are victims, right? All right, so we put out a study on that that covered a lot of issues, huge amount of issues. And there was an activity, a nonprofit, I won't say who it was, out in the western Grand Island. And there was an event coming up in their city that was kind of a statewide event. And so they let it be known and went out to the newspapers and just propagated, this study shows that we're going to get a lot of human trafficking here in our city when this event occurs. Well, our study never said that. And in fact, we had actually done a study of whether or not that event was related to human trafficking and found zero evidence. So they're out there dangling, right? Because they wanted to use, well, we got all this going on in major events, so we have a major event, so they immediately said that, which was no evidence for it whatsoever. Absolutely zero. But they thought it was going to do them a lot of good. And what did it end up doing? Well, it caused a lot of people to become aware of the fact that this was likely, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about that, in our part of Nebraska. And that's what they wanted. Unfortunately for them, what happens is, the organizers of the event went public and demanded the evidence. Oh shit, yes, damn right. Because you have done what? Maligned them, correct? Unless you have the evidence. You're saying they have an event that they They should have been aware that these things happen, and they're not, you're implying they're not aware of it, don't know anything. So they are irate. So in the end, what happened was, they were not forced to retract because guess who had to come in and help them? Because what would have happened is, they would have gotten 5 Pinocchios. You familiar with that with the Washington Post? So the anti-trafficking movement has already received 5 Pinocchios from the Washington Post for really bad data being abused by nonprofits for the purpose, good purposes. The purposes are well-intentioned. We want to get public awareness. But folks, getting public awareness falsely is like crying wolf. You know the story of the boy that cried wolf 3 times? So now who believes data? And who believes you next time you talk? See what you've done? You have destroyed your movement, or have undermined it. So I recommend caution in the use of these things, but you will live in a world where there is virtually no caution. And particularly at the present moment. People are just throwing out accusations with absolutely no evidence whatsoever. And are being embarrassed several months later for it. I invite you to avoid that at all costs. It may be impossible for you because you have to make money and live and eat. But be it known that that could happen. All right, be prepared to have to pull their ass out of the sling that they put themselves into. We try to forewarn them. Okay? All right, good enough. So good research is not research. This is it's an important point. It is not research that finds what you want to find. And there's a humility that's required. You're wrong. As a matter of fact, chances are very high you're wrong. Very high. What are you going to do with it? The world isn't the way you want it to be. The bunnies are white. Yeah? Now the question is, if you want to solve the problem, you're being right about the cause. Is it right in terms of, oh, I know it's got, no, that's not the issue. What really is the cause? Be right. You see what I'm saying? Then you can do something about the problem. Even if it's not what you wanted it to be, and you have to eat crow because it was what the opposition wanted it to be. So be it. You solve the problem. What's your problem? Is it your pride? Is it your moral whatever of the means? Or is it that, in that sense, is it solving the problem? That's where we are in research. That's where we want to be. That's the pristine notion. That's not where we are, but that's what we hope to be, right? That's what I aspire to. I fail, just like you will. But that's what we should aspire to. Because a world without that kind of honest science, right, is a world that would be the Soviet Union. They tried this in the Soviet Union. And it was determined under Lysenko in the 1940s, before the death of Stalin, 40s and early 50s. Lysenko, it's called Lysenkoism. Lysenko said, if we reduce the water amounts to crops every year a bit, the crops will get used to less water and begin to survive, grow, and blossom on less water, which is important to them because the Soviet Union had very little good arable land. Because the Fertile Triangle, which was almost all in Ukraine, gets less and less rainfall as you go east and becomes more and more marginal, starts looking like Wyoming. And Wyoming for them is really good cropland. This is a really crappy country for agriculture. They've got serious issues, all right? So Lysenko was trying to solve it. And they bought into this, and there was no evidence to that. There's no scientific evidence to this. There was no effort at getting a scientific effort. They did it, and guess what the result was?
People starved to die.
Yeah. Food shortages.
You would think they would have started before you get it.
What for? When you know the truth, you are never bothered by evidence against it. Never in the least, because you know the truth. All right, enough of that. All right, so that's what we're trying to do. That's the point we're trying to get at. And that's, we have the communication for it. All right, so we got the literature review. Any other questions on the literature review? This is where we find out what others have said and try to contribute. Yes?
So in a lot of like the research paper type sources, they have like their introduction where they have their hypothesis and then
Right.
they have conclusions.
Yes.
Do you want us to talk about what they conclude or like how?
I do not want you to
hypotheses
talk about individual articles. I want you to talk about what it is they together, as a collection, are talking about. And so I'm asking you to identify a hypothesis, 3 of them. So when you talk about one of them, you do not talk about any individual article when you refer to that hypothesis. You talk about what it is, without even referring to the articles at all, but what it is that some set of articles, some, we don't know, black box set of articles that you're going to make clear to us in the citations, and only then will I see them, right? But you're going to say, as I pointed out, the general argument of scholars holding this view is that it's economics that largely determines the likelihood of the survival of democracy, right? Among those economic factors that have been isolated or studied are GDP per capita, trade, dependency on oil or raw materials, right? And then I can cite for each of those pieces individual authors or sets of authors. But you notice I said nothing about an author or an article. Does that make sense? I'm describing what the literature is saying. Yeah? Does that make sense? Then I go to the next paragraph and say, an alternative hypothesis is that put out by the culturalists. They argue that culture is the primary determinant in the survival of democracy. Among the things they look at are whether or not there is a predisposition to military rule. So another set of scholars have looked at whether or not religious values are important to the survival of democracy. Notice I'm talking about the readings? Okay. And then we could say in the third one, a third set of scholars have looked more at process as opposed to snapshot, do you have something, but the process. Have certain things begun to occur? You have elite fragmentation is one thing that these scholars focused on. And you can talk about, Diamond, Jaworski, and Gallup. Well, and move on. See what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Yeah. Good question. Yeah, anybody else? Literature. Very, very important. Yep.
I have this written out, I just don't remember what specifically you wanted from it. It says, what is missing in the literature is blank. What
Yeah, okay, so the blank would be your hypothesis. So if I say, let's simply say, I point this as survival of democracy. I'm asking, how to explain the variation in the likelihood of survival of democracy? How do we explain why countries are more likely to survive, certain democracies are more likely to survive than others? That's my question. And I'm going to say, in the literature on the survival of democracy, there are 3 clusters of hypotheses. There are the economic theorists, there are the culturalists, and there are the process theorists. And then I go through and I explain them. Now that paragraph says, what's missing here, okay, is a focus on the process of the development of an economic factor. I am going to focus on that. I'm going to ask the question, do we have to see an emerging economy that, I don't know, whatever. Does it make sense?
So it's different than 3 hypotheses.
It is your hypothesis. And not your hypothesis, it's your question. This is the question you will ask in the research question. So the questions that's missing here, or the answer to this question. Does that make sense? All right. So let's make it to the answer to this question. Make it easier. You've looked at answers to questions, hypotheses. What answer is missing? Obviously, this is the question you're going to ask. Correct? Okay? Anyone else? So when you go to the literature, you're going to have a topic, not a question. Your question is, what's my question? But you have a topic. Cyber warfare, poverty, underdevelopment, violence, political violence, social mobility, civil war, state fragmentation, weak states. Something that, this is kind of the apple tree thing, something that at this point, you're just kind of interested in. All right? But it shouldn't be anything with something like success. No, nothing. Maybe healthcare. Maybe education budgets. Maybe graduation rates. Well, now we're getting really narrow. Okay, we're getting narrowed down now. Whatever it is, you've got something that you're interested in. Seatbelt uses on school buses. Fluoridation in Nebraska counties. Now we're getting very, very, very specific. But if you can't get that specific, get general. Is there something? But don't do something like these fuzzy words like success or good or betterment or justice. They're just too vague. They won't go anywhere. Okay? So you got a topic. All right? So now what do? You go to the literature. You go to the most current literature you can find. That is beginning to address that. What do? I mean, you know what to do. You have a list of words that are associated with that, and you Google them, right? Ta-da! Something magic. It's weird in this generation how this works like this. So you Google it, and I would suggest Google Scholar to start with, and you're going to find most of what you want there. And you're going to find the full articles, full text of articles. So you start looking through these articles, and what do? Look for the literature review. Look for the research question after you do the literature review. Because the literature review is going to talk about all these questions, or in reference to this question, all these answers, right, that have been given. And then that's going to be a clue to what this paper's about. So now go to the front and find the research question. Then go to somewhere after that with that opening salvo and find the answer. And you've kind of read the article. You don't need to read all the details at this point. You've got the gist. You've got it. You have the proposal. This is how executives will read things. They won't read all the details unless they're trying to do what? Figure out if they agree with the conclusion. But if you told them the conclusion, they already know what the conclusion is. And your point is, you want to know what it is that others are saying. What is it this piece is saying? What are they arguing? Did they find it? Move on to what? Some of the other articles in the literature review. See where those threads take you. If the first one doesn't take you anywhere, try something else. See if you can find, therefore, sort of the historical landscape of the questions that have asked about your issue. Cyber war, what are the questions that have been asked? Poverty, what are the questions that have been asked? Same-sex marriage, what are the questions that have been asked? Education budgets, what are the questions that have been asked? Healthcare systems, what are the questions that have been asked? Find out. Trace it back. Then once you start getting it, then start mapping it on a piece of paper. It's going to take a couple hours. Yes, it will. Sure will. Take work. You won't write for quite some time. And once you write, it should be pretty easy. Because if you sit there and you put down, all right, so this is where I think, here's the question, here's the hypothesis, here's what they found. Different question. Question, hypothesis. Oh, this is hard. Yeah, it is. Another one. Oh, crap, they're different. Oh, wait a minute, this one's the same as this one over here. Okay, I got two over here. Right here. A fourth one. A fifth one. A sixth one. A seventh one. An eighth one. Oh, shit, wait a minute. 5, 6, and 7, this guy says they're the same thing. Oh, and they belong over here. Okay. Got that? See how it works? It's like moving things around on a freaking Excel spreadsheet. I know none of you have seen one of those. Then once you got it all tabulated in an Excel spreadsheet, you sit there and you look at your 3 longest columns, and you would code. Read question. Now, which question do I want? Well, look for the one where the answers make sense to you, but something's missing, and you can contribute. Oh my gosh, you got it all right there. You're ready to write it. Just put it in the format. It's on the Excel spreadsheet. Lift it right off, put it in the freaking format. Does that make sense? So that's how you start. Now, what hopefully will happen is, of course, when you go through 10, you're gonna ask some more questions, and you're gonna start writing more of these things. Then you're gonna go 581, and you're gonna come back, and you're gonna do this. Those of you who are going to be the most successful of the students, as students, not in your life, but successful students, you're gonna find that there is a particular topic that's gonna merge into a particular question that's gonna be like yours. You're gonna start doing this, all right? If it gets to be too much for you, you're gonna have to go on to the PhD. My recommendation, don't tell anybody. Come see me, this is something you don't tell people, not even the priest. So because the priest will not forgive you, they will tell everybody that you are a pervert for wanting to have a PhD. So the only person you can confess this to is people like me. And you can come and confess it to me, and I swear I won't tell anybody else. All right? Okay? I promise you. And I will help you through this very, very difficult time of your life and help you to wholeness, and you will ultimately emerge, hopefully cured of the stupidity of wanting to be a PhD. Okay? I will work with you on that. I will not impose the solution on you. I will help you to find your solution. Does that sound good? So that would be kind of like people that kind of go, oh my gosh, and then you have to get a PhD, you become a research analyst, and you probably do high-end crap. It's exciting work. All right. Literature reviews. All right? Good? Oh, okay. Caught me just at the end, because I was ready to cut this one off.
I know you said, what's saying like there should be no hypothesis.
Yep.
But I thought you said last class too that if you didn't find anything missing, you could also say.
You can also say that there's still a debate, and I'm going to contribute by saying this is the right position in the debate.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Now, I recommend that whatever your position is, if it's going to be that, it's the last one you discuss. It makes more sense to the reader. It's less kind of jerking around like, you know, that crazy guy driving that race car on the road. Okay, anybody else? Literature reviews. Anybody? Okay, on the literature review, you will submit the references. You may type on both sides of the paper, but all sections of the paper, to include the reference section, will be double spaced. Okay? We do not number references. They are alphabetized. They're listed in alphabetic order, right? We do not use footnotes for citations. Footnotes, should have no need of a footnote at all unless, and in fact, I don't want you to use them, but what they use them for is to give further detail on a particular thing that if you put it in the paper is of no consequence to most people because they can give a flying rat's ass about it. But the techies want to know. So you put it in a footnote. Got it? What is the mathematical, well, I know that you use that procedure, but exactly what was the mathematical equation? That's the answer in the footnote. You understand? The mathematical. So for those who want to know, you don't say it that way. For you people out there that are so anal, whatever, you know, but no, it's not that. It's kind of like, okay, so here's the equation I used among the choices. I used what so-and-so's, Gallagher's 1969, whatever, here it is. Okay, make sense? That's what footnotes are used for. So you use in text, that means in the narrative, in your sentences, parentheses, with the name of the author and the date. That's how it's done. It's APA, parenthetical in-text citation style. And then I will be able to find that author in your references alphabetically. All right? Now, the references you will place on their own distinct page. So there'll be a page break at the end of the literature review between it and the references. It's the only part of the paper where that's true. If you were to put the literature review together with the research question in the same paper, there would be no page break. There would be just a double spacing, a double-double, right? Here it is a page break for references. They always start distinctly on their own page. Okay? Yes?
You said the name of the author and the date?
Yes, and the year. Not the day of the, not like 3 January, but 1951. Yeah.
If we have parentheses and we're mentioning like the multiple articles that mention this one hypothesis,
Yes.
how do we separate them? Like, is there like a semicolon in between?
Yeah, I mean, generally that's what happens. I mean, you, as long as you are consistent, first of all, they should be alphabetical, all right? Or they should be numerical by the year, one or the other. But they're the same everywhere in terms of your standard. If you apply the standard at this point in the paper, you have to use exactly the same standard everywhere else in the paper. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, let's suppose you have, I don't know, Clark, 1951, Cooper, 1914, and Gallagher, 2012. All right? If I don't want to put commas here, then I can just do that. Oops. Then that'll work. That's one way to do it. Or, let's say I really like the comma here. Then I put semicolons here. Otherwise, I refer to the online version of the Chicago Manual Style. It's all spelled out there in enormous detail for you. Okay. Other questions? Questions?
Do you have like a specific word count you'd like for it?
No. I have no standard on page counts, word counts. My standard is, did you do what I asked you to do? Yes or no? How closely did you do what I gave you to do? Okay. And I gave you a format, so I'm looking for it. If you want to move away from that format, you do so at your own risk. And I'm willing to entertain your attempting to do so, and you should, because it's really kind of a workmanlike, clunky, stylistically ugly, but that's fine for right now. Be stylistically ugly, and then ramp it up later. Right now is not the time to be cute. Okay. Once you got that A, then try something a bit different. See if you can push it up to an A+. Some of you will, okay. Some of you will discover very soon that 100 is almost unobtainable. Not unobtainable, but almost. Okay. And you should not cry if you get a 0, but if you do get a 0, you should recognize you probably did not do what I told you to do. So, what did you not do? Okay. 0s are common. Now, this class, I'm hoping will have far fewer. I'm teaching this differently, like I said before, because of the size of the class. We're going more slowly, more carefully. So we'll see if we also can get it done better in each phase as well. So I'm very hopeful we'll have no 0s. But normally it's half the class gets a 0 in the first hour.
I noticed you said first.
Isn't that, does it encouraging? But don't worry about it. I have lots of tissue in the office. I never run out of tissue. In fact, the university has truckloads of delivery to my office. Make sure Clark has those tissues. All right, literature review, we good? And boys do cry. I've seen it. Yeah. What's that?
This is not about the Lit Review, but you
Yes.
told me to remind you about the countries comparison.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. So if you go to your, to take a break here, we'll go to the syllabus. You will notice that on the 25th, when the literature review due, it says United States, United Kingdom, France. And you will also notice that that's the case on October 2nd, Nigeria and Mexico are listed as countries, and then Germany on October 19th, and then down the page on November 13th, United States and Mexico. And then on the back side of the page, on November 15th, France. So when you see a country listed, what I want you to do is I want you to to research, do a little bit of study and find what are the central institutions of that country, political institutions? What are the institutions of the state? The state, okay? So, what institutions, for instance, elect the government? How is the government elected? How does the government interact with the legislature? How do they interact with the judiciary? How many houses does the legislature have? What are the rules of the interaction between the legislative houses? How are each of these appointed, elected, or somehow put in place? Those are the rules that define the state. I want you to look at and get a sense of those rules. Okay? With me? That's what, for those countries. In the United States, that's very easy. We actually did it in class. President, 2 houses of Congress, the Senate, the House of Representatives, a Supreme Court, governors of states, legislatures of states, and Supreme Courts of states. The interactions between them are defined by federalism on a vertical level, and on a horizontal level at the level of the national government, or Washington D.C. rather. What we have is separation of powers and checks and balances. Now, how are they elected? There's a particular electoral rule. It's a bit different for the president than it is for the 2 houses. Each state gets 2 senators. Each senator is elected in a first past the post or plurality electoral system. Right? Those are the things I want you to know. Okay? Thank you. All right. We're good on lit reviews. No.
Yeah, I have one question. Where do we turn in the literature review?
In class.
Okay.
So it's due at the beginning of the hour or at the end of the hour. Just make sure I have it before I walk out. Okay?
So for this thing that you're talking about that's due Monday, is there something like written up that you want us to?
No, I want you to be able
Just be
to
ready.
discuss those countries and that, or at least if I discuss them or we discuss them together, you have some sense what the hell I'm talking about. Because otherwise you're gonna be totally lost. All right? Other questions? All right, research question section. I've run this about a page to page and a half, generally. Sometimes it can go 2. If you go much past 2, you are probably doing something wrong. You're engaging in a lot of BS. These are not terribly long paragraphs. I have given you virtually sentence by sentence. In fact, I have. I'm laughing. I had a 591 student. He's a good kid, still struggling, you know. I wrote his paper over the phone last night. Okay, get a pen and a piece of paper. Are you ready? Look at yours. Okay, here's what it should look like. It is what it should look like. So, there is variation in, and I use this topic. We can see this variation in the following information. So-and-so, actually, I'll tell you what he's doing. He's looking at graduation rates across destitute cities. Very interesting topic. So there's a category of cities that are classified as destitute cities by the United States government based on the income of the city, the average income of the city, for families with 2 children, right? So those are called destitute cities, and there are, I don't know how many, because I can't get him to tell me how many there are, but the government knows. All right, so I said, all right, so his question is, how do you account for, the fact that there are different graduation rates? So here's what we did last night. I said to him, all right, there's variation on the graduation rate across destitute cities in the United States, period. The lowest graduation rate is that of, I don't know, Cleveland, period, at whatever percent, period. The highest graduation rate is in whatever city at whatever percentage, period. How do you explain this variation? Question mark. Paragraph 1, done. Paragraph 2. Okay. I will look at all destitute cities in the United States using data from 2015, which are the most variable for graduation rates, period. I defined a destitute city in the manner defined by the US government, housing and urban development. And then I paraphrase the definition, period. There are a number of social organizations, institutions that are interested in this question because they have an interest in raising graduation rates across the United States. Okay, period. Among these are the U.S. Department of Education and the National Education Association, period. Done with that paragraph. I hypothesize, and I'm not quite sure what the hypothesis would be, so I hypothesize that the proximity to mountain ranges explains explains variation in the graduation rates across distant cities. The closer one is to a mountain range, the higher the graduation rate will be. That's because people can get high in the mountains. I don't know. But that's the logic, which is total nonsense, right? But that's what I'm looking for. Period. Done. See that? Got it? That's research question section. Is there a better way to write it? You betcha. Should you try it? No. Not until you get it right. Okay? And then I write down, okay, you did this so well. Maybe you can say this a little bit better. Well, maybe, but if you can't, don't. But remember, you get the highest grade on any submission, is the grade. You don't get, in other words, you're going to turn it in 3 times. You don't get the final turn-in grade. You get the highest of the 3 submissions for that section. And then I take that, one each, for research question, literature review, and hypothesis theory. I add them together, divide by 3, and magically you get a grade. Isn't that weird?
And you said we can come and see you with like drafts of it to like.
That's why I have tissues. Boxes and boxes and boxes of tissues. Yes, of course. It's best probably, unless you have a quick question, it's probably best not to call. But, I mean, if that's the only thing you can do, let's at least try to talk on the phone. It's very, very clumsy, but let's not text. Or text by email, right? Because that's, okay. Okay? All right, what else? Nothing? Are we good on the research question section? Are we good? So if you put this all together so far, you have about 2 pages of references, because you've got 20 references. You have a 1.5 page research question, and you have about 2 to 3 pages on a literature review. So far you have a big 7 pages. And we're going to add 1 more page to it, it's 8 pages. And because you can do it 3 times, it's going to be 24 pages. And we meet the totally, arbitrary standard established by the arbitrary committee of the arbitrary college in this arbitrary university. This is how much you write, it's how well you write. Okay. And I think sometimes smaller is better so we can get better, really, really good, and then let's expand out, right? All right. So we get the 3rd section is what? What's the 3rd section of the proposal? The 3rd and final section. Only 1 left. Yes?
Hypothesis and theory.
Right, hypothesis theory. And what do you suppose are the 2 things we have to discuss?
Hypothesis and theory.
Brilliant. So, how many paragraphs do you think we have minimum? 2. 1 for, and 1 for?
Theory.
That's amazing. So how many pages do you think generally 2 paragraphs fit on?
1.
Now, an hypothesis is the first paragraph. Hypothesis and theory, First would be a hypothesis, and would be theory second, okay? Now, I say this because if I say it this way, I'm hoping you see me laughing and it will remind you not to screw this up, okay? That's the point. That's it. I'm not gonna, if you come in my office and you screwed up, I'm not gonna laugh at you, I'm just gonna look at you and go, and you're gonna look at me and go like this, and then we're gonna laugh together. Right? That's how it works. Okay, all right, so hypothesis. First sentence, I hypothesize that X causes Y. That proximity to the location of mountains explains the variation in graduation rates across destitute cities. Period. X causes Y. X, proximity to mountains. Y, graduation rates.
Is it X explains Y or X causes Y?
Either one, but I like explains better. Particularly explains the variation. You know, or accounts for the variation. Ooh, cool. You know what I'm talking about? All right. Now, second sentence. You have to define the independent variable. You've already defined the dependent variable. You did that in the research question section. You have yet to define the independent variable. Now you do it. I define proximity to a mountain range as, period. I define X as, how do you define it? Period. Paragraph, done. I hypothesize that X causes Y. I define X as, yada, 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 period, done. If you use a source to define this, do not quote it directly, and please, don't tell me I use Merriam-Webster's dictionary. Don't tell me. Don't say that. That's really high school. Let's get way beyond that, okay? With me? So what do? Never quote it directly, paraphrase it, and put in parentheses the source. Okay, now the second paragraph, this is a little bit more difficult. This is the logic. A theory. All right, let's go through this. What is a dependent variable?
One that can't exist without the independent variable?
It's what?
One that can't exist without the independent variable?
Yes, that's one way to look at it, but it kind of like only defines it reference to something else. So that's a good, you're right, absolutely right, but I'd like to get something a little bit better. That's a good start for us.
The dependent variable is the thing that's being changed by the independent variable.
Okay, but again, you're getting better, but you're still tied to something else.
Constant?
It's
So
not a
it's a
constant.
variable.
It's a yeah, good. What's the dependent variable? It's a political phenomenon that we wish to explain why it occurs. Does that make sense? It's an outcome. It's a political outcome that we want to know why it happens. So we can explain it. When does war happen? When does political violence happen? When does economic development happen? When is more like, well, why? What are the conditions under which that happens? So when those conditions come together, that's the when. When they come together. So the real question is why? What are the causal factors? What causes this thing? Okay? So we want to know, there's a political phenomenon, a sitting president being reelected for a second term. When does that happen? Under what conditions does that happen? More likely to happen. Right? When's the United States, under what conditions the United States is more likely to go to war? Well, I think we'd like to know the answer to that right now, wouldn't we? And not just now, I was thinking about that during the entire Obama era. Couldn't figure out, why are we going to war in Libya? Are we gonna go to war in Syria? See what I'm saying? What are the causal tripwires here? Are we gonna go to war against North Korea? Are we gonna go to war against Russia? Are we gonna go to war against Syria? I don't know, but that would be good. We would like to know, what are the causal factors that increase the probability, right? That's what we're looking for. We're looking for a political phenomenon that we need to explain why it happens. Conditions under which it is going to happen. All right? That's the dependent variable. What's the independent variable? Simpler to define. It is the what? The causal factor. The independent variable is the causal factor. All right? What is a hypothesis? This is in your notes. What is a hypothesis? It is a statement of what?
That states like what the X and the Y are?
Yeah, there we go. But don't use X and Y, because those are just, like I said the other day, nothing magic about them. They're really not definitional in any way whatsoever. We're just using them as a convention. But that's right. But instead of calling it X and Y, it's a statement of what? Not a statement of X and Y, but a statement of what? Cause and effect. We are now defining a term that you will find on quizzes. Henceforth. Hypothesis is a statement of cause and effect. In that statement, how many variables are there? 2. Which one's the cause? Independent variable. What's the effect? Dependent variable. What is a independent variable? It is the causal variable. What is the dependent variable again? What? It's a political phenomenon for which we seek explanation, or that we seek to explain. What is the goal of political science? What is the goal of political science? What? Explanation of what? Of political phenomena. This is what we do to achieve a goal. We make statements of cause and effect, and we test the statements. Because our goal is to explain political phenomena, which means that we are trying to do what? Find the causes. So the search for causality is explanation. They are absolutely the same thing. They are definitional. Search for causality and explanation. They mean the same thing. And what is the goal of political science? For the third time. What is the goal of political science? It's in your notes. You just wrote it down.
The search for explanation of political phenomena.
Okay. Explanation. The goal is explanation of political phenomena, or the search for causality for political phenomena. That is the goal of political science. Explanation of political phenomena. Search for causality for political phenomena. Goal of political science. Explanation. Hypothesis. The state, cause and effect. The cause, an independent variable. What's the causal variable? Effect is a dependent variable. It's a political phenomenon we seek to explain. What's the goal of political science? Test those things. Why? Because we want to get at explanation of political phenomena. We're searching for causality about political events, about political phenomena. all wrapped up. Now, what's missing here, though, is something called theory. Okay. So, let me just put it this way. It is the logic story of how the cause leads to the effect. Is the logic story of how the cause leads to the effect. If you're going to tell me that Nicolas Cage movies are the cause of pool drownings in the United States, that whenever he releases a movie, or the further away we are, the closer we are to a movie release, either prior to or after, the higher the incidence of pool drowning. I want to know the logic, please. That's called the theory. So, as the date of release of a Nicolas Cage movie comes close or has occurred, women are reminded that they love Nicolas Cage, but the closer they get to it, the more they're reminded that Nicolas Cage is not a person they would ever want to kiss or hug because he is a hairy beast. Therefore, caught between, on the one hand, their lust for Nicolas Cage and their inability to act on that lust, they kill themselves in larger numbers than normal.
Logical.
Totally logical, but
Yeah.
come on. I mean, really, you know? So we just sort of go, okay, you know, I don't think so. Probably not. So, how do we account for pool drownings? I don't know, but that's not going to help. Because there may be a correlation there, but that is a stupid story. And I can't get a story that gives me a story of the correlation, so I just go, shit happens. It's just sort of a random thing in nature that Nicolas Cage and pool drownings just happen to come together, right? So let's suppose that I notice, I ask myself, you know, in the university, different classrooms have different amounts of chalk available. Some have more, some have less. How to explain the availability and the amount of chalk in each classroom? Good question. I'm going to hypothesize that the closer you are to a Jesuit residence, the less chalk there is in a classroom. So what is the dependent variable that I'm seeking to explain? What?
The presence of chalk in classrooms.
The availability of chalk in a classroom. How much chalk there is in a classroom. What is the independent causal variable that I've hypothesized?
The distance to the Jesuit, whatever you said.
Right, and what's missing here? A logic story linking distance from a Jesuit living quarters, right? What's the word I should use? Residence. The distance from a Jesuit residence measured in feet, right? In linear feet, direct linear. And the amount of chalk in a classroom, right? Now why is that? Because I'm hypothesizing that an important element in the Jesuit diet is chalk. And the reason a person goes into the Jesuit order is one has a penchant for eating or consuming chalk. And so that being the case, and the reason they do this is because they do this because they're called of God, right, into the Jesuit order. And the way God calls them is through this unnatural desire for chalk, right? And this helps them deal with all the other unnatural desires they have. So therefore, they get led by the need to consume chalk. Now, what is the one order in the Catholic Church where you are going to be around chalk? Well, the order that's attached to universities and schools, and that's only the Jesuits. So therefore, if you have all these orders to go into, what appeals to you? The chalk order, Jesuits. So therefore, late at night, when everybody's sleeping, the Jesuits steal away and consume chalk. And the closer you are, the easier it is for them to get to you. There's my theory. Now, a theory has real power, unlike Nicolas Cage, this one really does. Because in theory, it should give me answers to more than one question. In fact, it should raise questions. In fact, I have already given you an answer to another question in the theory. Did you see it? How do we predict the likelihood that someone will become a Jesuit?
Feel like chalk.
Because they have an unnatural desire to consume chalk. You see this? See how it works? This is crazy great. You see? So that's what we want. We want stories of the logic behind things. Now, do I want a huge, long? No, I don't want a huge. I want a pretty simple paragraph, right? For some of you, that will be really difficult. Right? So let's play a little bit with some of the difficult ones that are actually real, unlike chalk. Although I happen to think that's a real one. You don't accept that. All right. But before we go there, do you understand what you have to do in these two paragraphs? That's it. Your proposal's done. Just do it.
So basically the theory is the only one we don't have like the scaffolding for you, like we just kind of go with.
This is sort of like, it doesn't tell you how this gets here. It just says, it's an assertion of something, right? This really lays it out, the logic of how you get from the cause to effect. Yeah?
Yeah.
Make sense? All right. Anybody else? Hypothesis theory. May I sit down? Good, because I'm going to do it anyway. Other questions? So, among social science stupid questions, well, we could ask lots of stupid questions. On what days is Dr. Clark more likely to dress in a suit? You notice that some days I've come out in a suit, so how do we explain that variation?
Quiz days.
Quiz days. There we go. There's a possibility. So, on what days is Dr. Clark more likely to wear a gray tie? That's not a variable. That's a constant. Every day. All his ties are gray. So we have no way of measuring the difference. But we do know there are days that are variable. Because some days he may come with that gray tie, or he may not come with that gray tie because he doesn't have a suit on. So how do we explain those things? That's what we're trying to, I mean, not that, obviously, but those are the questions we ask. When do we explain the higher probability of something occurring? What are the conditions that increase the probability? Answer, his wife is asking to take her to dinner. Those are the days he wears a suit or does not wear a suit? Does not.
Why is that?
There's a story. Exactly. That's exactly it. Yes, you got it. You got it. That doesn't tell me shit. That does. It's the freaking story I want. Exactly. It's the theory. Think about this. I mean, you just sit there and go, yep, how to explain Democrats? Women. I'm a genius. And I'm going, why? And you always look at me like, I don't know, it just is. Women, it's good. Nicolas Cage. What? Come on! This is stupid. You understand? Women vote Democrat. Okay, why? Read the logic. The stories are not good. They're naturally soft. Caretakers and Democrats are all a bunch of pansies. What? What? Come on. Most of the Democrats I know are killers. They're like Antifa. They're mean, they're nasty, they're angry people, right? I mean, that's what conservatives think. All right, fine. I mean, that's a stupid theory. You understand? That makes no sense. So why, give me the story. Why does Dr. Clark not wear a suit on the night he goes to the restaurants with his wife?
She likes to work out.
She likes to work out.
No, you like to work out.
I like to work
You're
out.
ready for the date.
Oh, I see. Pretty good, but not there. But that doesn't, because I can work out with or without a top. Just take it off. Put it back on when I'm done. I'm gonna have to go to dinner. With what? With the suit. And what always comes with my suits? Great ties. And what do I not want to screw up?
Your tie.
Ah! There you go. Now, but that also has to tell you something about my wife. Does she care if I wear a tie? No. Because she was born where? Montana. She married me. That's because why? Opposites attract, and you never marry the person you have so much in common with. Because that would be a marriage in hell. That would be like marrying yourself. I mean, it's like sitting there looking in a mirror and go, I love you. Are you? You're sick. That is so stupid. That's when people come to me and go, oh, I'm so in love with her, Dr. Clark. I just sit there listening. Oh, we have so much in common. I go, you won't marry her. And he goes, oh no, I'm going to marry her. So wasn't he going to divorce her? I am an East Coaster who talks too much. And let me give you my wife's criteria for a husband. Right? The Marlboro Man. Tall. Lanky. Right? Given the few words. A lover of animals. I hate dogs. A person that bulls and horses fear. I'm afraid of them. Right? In short, a man's man. No. Not there. Okay? All right, so we got the story. So we need a story behind these things. That's what you need for theory. So let's play with that one. Women vote Democrat. So how do we explain the greater likelihood that somebody will vote Democrat? She's a woman. All right? Statistically, that's true. Women are more likely to vote Democrat than men. All women. So the problem is, if we just simply say women are the causal factor, what do we get for a story? Really, really obnoxious, politically incorrect shit. Correct? Right? That's what we get. It's our innate biological impulse towards, feeling good about the world or something. I mean, come on. Right? I mean, does that mean I'm immune to it? It may mean I am immune to that, but it doesn't mean the rest of these guys are. Well, they are too. But that's because we have a bad selection of guys in here. But if we had better guys, we'd have, guys that really have an innate feeling for the world. None that are in here. All right? By the way, this is crazy thinking. So what is it that we have to ask ourselves? Well, we have to ask ourselves not the question of who's more likely to vote Democrat. Why don't we ask ourselves another question that really comes to it, will help us to break down why women are more likely. So we ask ourselves the question, among women, who's more likely to vote Democrat? But that's still the wrong question, because that's the easy one. Among women,
Who's not likely to vote Democrat?
who's more likely to vote Republican? Yeah. We have to ask the question nobody wants to know the answer to. Right? So, for instance, I went to a research conference in England years ago, and I heard this presentation, and the scholar got up, and she said up front, she said, I am a feminist. All right. Okay? And she said, so the results I'm going to report deeply, deeply, deeply dissatisfied me, but they are what they are. We wanted to know, she said, in England, we had a very surprising outcome where we had a change in law that the conservatives put forward that restricted abortion significantly from what we had. And it was supported by very large numbers of women. And we wanted to know, who the hell are they? Because we're like all sisters. No, you're not. Any more than we're all brothers. Right? We're just people. So the question is, what is it about us or about a woman in England that made her more likely to vote and support a conservative position on abortion, which won overwhelmingly to restrict it. They found a lot of women, and it was what kind of women, do you suppose? Mothers, older, mothers, grandmothers. So it was age, it was younger women against older women. And where was the cutoff? Almost the point exactly at marriage. Sometime between 25 and 30. Flipped. What do you suppose we find in the likelihood of more likely to vote Republican among women? What do you suppose is the really defining characteristic here? Economic security. Financial security. Aha! Can we make a story out of that?